Then it's his mark, or whoever he worked with. Elena's gaze drifted to the margin notes, short phrases in German, hurried and emotional. One of them caught her eye. Sie haben mich gezwungen. She opened her translation app again, the words appearing a moment later. They forced me. She whispered the words aloud, her voice barely audible. They forced him. Briggs frowned. To do what? To hide it. She said, to carry it. Maybe even to bury it. The thought made her chest tighten. The ledger wasn't just a list, it was a diary written in disguise. A man's quiet rebellion beneath the machinery of war. That night, as the city lights flickered outside their window, Elena sat by the bed, reading the letter again and again. Each time the words felt heavier. The train must never be forgotten. It carried not gold but souls. The phrasing echoed like a prayer, a warning, a lament. She closed her eyes, exhaustion finally breaking through fear. But just as sleep began to take her, her phone buzzed softly beside her. A new message, unknown number, we know where you're going. Her breath caught. Another ping. Germany won't save you. She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. Across the room, Briggs stirred. What is it? Elena's voice shook. They know where we're going. He grabbed his jacket, already on his feet. Then we leave now. Outside, the fog was rolling in again, thicker than before, as if the past itself were following them, refusing to let go. Elena clutched the ledger to her chest as they stepped into the cold night air. The truth was no longer hidden. It was awake, and now it was chasing her. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The airport was a blur of movement and noise, faces, voices, announcements echoing through polished halls that seemed too bright for the darkness Elena carried. Every sound felt distant, muffled, as if she were moving underwater. She clutched her worn satchel close to her chest, the weight of the ledger pressing like a heartbeat beneath the fabric. Briggs walked beside her, his gaze sweeping the crowd with the caution of a man who'd already learned what it felt like to be hunted. He hadn't said much since the messages. They didn't need to. The silence between them was heavy with shared understanding. Someone, somewhere, was always watching. At the check-in counter, Elena handed over her passport with a trembling smile. The clerk didn't seem to notice her shaking hands. Frankfurt, she asked, stamping the ticket. Elena nodded. Frankfurt. As they waited to board, she tried to focus on the ordinary, the smell of coffee, the hum of rolling suitcases, the laughter of strangers on their way to ordinary destinations. She envied them. For them, the world was still simple. For her, it had become a map of danger and ghosts. When the plane finally lifted off, she exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Through the small window, the lights of her country blurred beneath the clouds and disappeared. It should have felt like escape. It didn't. Halfway across the ocean, the cabin was dim, filled with the low murmur of sleeping passengers. Briggs dozed lightly in the seat beside her, one hand still near the inside pocket of his jacket where his pistol rested. Elena couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed everything, the men at her door, the crates, the art, the voice in the fog whispering, "We only want the paintings." She turned on the overhead light and opened the ledger again, careful not to draw attention. The pages rustled softly. Her eyes scanned the familiar lines, but one section she hadn't noticed before caught her breath. A page marked with a faint wax seal, the same crest she'd seen on the crate and the box. Beneath it, a short note written in English. If this record survives, find the letters. They are the key. J, W, the letters. Her pulse quickened. Johann Weber's letters, the ones she'd already found in fragments. But this meant there were more. Maybe a whole collection, hidden somewhere. She leaned closer, her hand trembling slightly. A small notation followed, scrawled in the margin. The archives under the church Königstein. Königstein. She whispered it aloud. A town near Frankfurt, if she remembered correctly. That was where she would start. By the time the plane landed, dawn was breaking over Germany, a pale, ghostly light stretching across the horizon. The air was colder, sharper, filled with that European stillness that always felt older than the present. They collected their bags in silence. Briggs rented a small black sedan, his cautious eyes flicking to every car in the lot. "We keep moving," he said. "Never stay in one place too long." Elena nodded, though exhaustion dragged at every part of her. "Just get me to Königstein." The drive was quiet, winding through forested roads that curved between stone villages and fog-shrouded fields. Each turn of the wheel felt like a step deeper into history. When they reached Königstein, the fog hadn't lifted. The town was small, almost dreamlike cobblestone streets, old timbered houses, and a church tower that rose like a sentinel above the mist. Its bells tolled faintly as they parked near the square. Elena pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, glancing up at the towering church spire. The building was ancient, its stones dark with centuries of rain, its stained glass windows flickering faintly in the muted light. Inside, the air smelled of wax and dust. A single old priest lit candles near the altar, his movements slow and deliberate. Elena hesitated before approaching him. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Do you speak English?" He turned, his expression kind but cautious. "A little. I'm looking for something old letters, possibly kept in the archives below the church, from a man named Johann Weber." At the mention of the name, the priest's brow furrowed. He set the candle down slowly. "Weber? Yes," he murmured. "I have heard that name. Come." He led them down a narrow stone staircase behind the altar, the air growing colder with each step. The scent of earth and age thickened. When they reached the bottom, he unlocked a heavy iron gate and gestured toward the rows of shelves and boxes stacked against the walls. "These are the archives," he said quietly. "Much was damaged in the war, but some records survived." Elena felt her breath quicken. "Can I look?" He nodded. "Take your time." For hours, she searched papers yellowed by decades, names written in looping cursive, dust that clung to her hands like ash. Briggs stood guard by the stairs, his watchful eyes never still. Then she found a small wooden crate marked W. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were bundles of letters, tied with faded string. The ink on the envelopes was almost illegible, but the name was clear on everyone. Johann Weber. Elena lifted one carefully, reading the return address: Dachau Refugee Camp, 1946. Another Munich, 1951. Each one dated from a time long after the war, addressed to museums, families, government offices. Letters that pleaded, begged, documented. She opened one. "To whom it may concern, the art on train 77 does not belong to any one man. It belongs to the families taken from us. I was forced to move it, to seal it, to hide it. Forgive me. I tried to save what I could." Her hands shook as she read. Another letter echoed the same sentiment. "If you find it, return it. Do not sell it. Do not profit from it. Return it to the names in the ledger." Tears stung her eyes. Weber hadn't been a thief. He had been a guardian, a man burdened with the impossible duty of saving art that had already been stolen, trying to give it back to the dead who could no longer claim it. She sank onto the cold stone floor, surrounded by history's whispers. Briggs knelt beside her quietly. "You found him," he said softly. Elena nodded, her voice barely a whisper. He wasn't hiding a crime, he was preserving a memory. Above them, the church bells rang again, their deep notes echoing through the walls like a benediction. For the first time in weeks, the sound didn't feel like a warning. It felt like acknowledgement. She gathered the letters gently, wrapping them in cloth. "These need to go home," she said, "to every name in that ledger." Briggs helped her to her feet. "Then, we start with the first one." They climbed the stairs in silence, the candles flickering as they passed. When they stepped back into the sunlight, the fog had finally begun to thin. Elena looked up at the sky, pale blue, breaking through grey, and for the first time, hope didn't feel like a betrayal of reason. But in the distance, parked across the square, a dark car idled quietly. The same kind, the same watchers. Briggs saw it too. His jaw tightened. They followed us here. Elena clutched the letters closer. The warmth she'd felt moments ago turned to ice. History, it seemed, wasn't ready to let its ghosts go. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The air in Königstein had changed. The mist that once felt protective now felt suffocating, a veil tightening around Elena's throat. The narrow streets, cobbled, quiet, lined with shuttered windows, carried an uneasy silence, as if the entire town were holding its breath. She and Briggs had been on the move for 2 days, changing inns each night, their rest brief, their trust thinner than ever. Every sound outside the door, every creak, every muffled voice made Elena reach for the satchel where the letters and the ledger slept. They were staying now in an inn perched above the valley, its slanted roof and aged wood groaning with the wind. The old owner, a woman with pale blue eyes, had given them a small attic room with a view of the river below. It should have been beautiful. It wasn't. That morning, as the light pushed weakly through the window, Briggs paced the narrow space, rubbing a hand over his tired face. "We can't keep running like this," he muttered. "Every time we think we're safe, they find us." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, the ledger open on her lap. "We can't stop now," she said quietly. "Not when we're this close." He looked at her, exhaustion carved deep into his features. "Close to what, Elena? You found Weber's letters. You have the proof. Isn't that enough?" She shook her head, eyes tracing the ink on the fragile pages. "Not yet. These letters don't just name what was hidden. They name who it belonged to, the families, the descendants. Their stories were erased, and I can't leave it like that. Not when I can still give them back their truth." Briggs sighed, leaning against the wall. "You're talking about taking on governments, collectors, entire institutions. You think they'll let you waltz into history and hand it back?" Her gaze lifted slowly, calm but unflinching. "They can try to stop me, but they can't stop this." She held up the ledger, its cover cracked and heavy with time. "It's too real to silence forever." He said nothing. He didn't need to. The fear in his eyes said enough, not fear of her mission, but fear of the cost. A knock shattered the silence. Both of them froze. It was soft, hesitant, the kind of knock meant to sound harmless. But in the stillness of that small room it rang like thunder. Briggs moved first, glancing through the peephole. Then he tensed. 2 men, he whispered, "coats, not hotel staff." Elena's pulse quickened. "They found us." He gestured for her to grab the satchel, out the back. They slipped down the narrow staircase, boots thudding softly against creaking wood. Behind them, another knock, louder this time, then the rattle of the door handle. By the time they reached the alley behind the inn, the sky had dimmed into a flat grey. The wind carried the faint smell of rain and the far-off echo of the church bells below. "Where?" Elena whispered. Briggs scanned the street, spotting a narrow footpath leading down toward the river. "That way." They moved quickly, keeping low. The path was slick with dew, winding through tall grass and shadow. From the road above, they heard the distant sound of a door slamming and voices calling out in German. "Faster," Briggs urged. The 2 of them followed the path until it opened into the riverside. Königstein's castle ruins loomed in the distance, jagged stone against the pale sky, a monument to centuries of conflict. The sight might have been beautiful if not for the fear crawling in Elena's veins. Briggs stopped near an old stone bridge. "We'll follow the river east," he said. "There's a train station in the next town. From there, maybe." A sharp crack echoed through the air. Wood splintered near his feet. Gunshot down, he barked, grabbing her arm and pulling her behind the stone wall. The echo of another shot ricocheted through the valley. Elena's breath came in short bursts, the metallic tang of fear rising in her throat. "They're shooting at us." "Looks like it." Briggs growled, peering over the edge. "One of them's by the trees. The other's another shot." Stone exploded inches from his shoulder. He ducked, cursing under his breath. Elena clutched the satchel to her chest, her mind racing. "We can't stay here, I know." He scanned the terrain, calculating. "There's an old service tunnel under the bridge. If we can get to it." Before he could finish, a shadow moved through the fog across the riverbank, tall, fast, closing in. Briggs grabbed her hand. "Go." They ran, boots slipping on wet grass, the sound of gunfire chasing them like thunder. The world blurred into gray and white and fear. Elena stumbled, her knees scraping the stones, but Briggs pulled her up without slowing. They reached the arch of the bridge, ducking beneath its crumbling frame. Water dripped from the stones, cold and relentless. The tunnel entrance was half hidden by brush, the old iron gate rusted and half open. "In here," Briggs hissed. They slipped inside. The darkness swallowed them instantly. The tunnel was narrow, damp, filled with the echo of dripping water. Their breaths came loud in the confined space. Elena leaned against the wall, heart pounding so hard she thought the echo might give them away. "Briggs, how did they find us? We changed cars, changed hotels. They're tracking the story, not us," he said grimly. "Every move we make, we leave ripples. A card number, a camera, a phone signal doesn't take much to follow the wake." She sank to her knees, clutching the satchel. "They'll never let us tell it." He crouched beside her, his voice low but steady. "Then we make sure someone else can." Elena looked up, confused. Briggs reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive. "I made copies," he said. "The ledger, the photos, the letters, everything. It's backed up and encrypted." Her eyes widened. "While you were asleep last night." His mouth twitched into something like a smile. "You weren't the only one thinking ahead." Elena's relief was immediate, but so was the weight of what it meant. "If they catch us, they'll get nothing," he said firmly. "We don't die with the truth, we pass it on." The tunnel trembled faintly. Footsteps echoed distantly from the entrance, slow, deliberate, getting closer. Briggs's hand tightened around his pistol. He motioned for her to stay low. Elena pressed herself against the wall, clutching the satchel so tightly her fingers hurt. The footsteps drew nearer, the beam of a flashlight slicing through the darkness like a blade. Briggs raised his weapon. The light paused. Then, unexpectedly, a voice, calm, accented, older. "Please, do not shoot. I'm not here to harm you." Elena froze. The beam lowered. From the shadows emerged an elderly man, white-haired, stooped but sharp-eyed. His hands were raised in surrender. "My name is Johann Weber," he said softly. "I believe you've been looking for me." Elena's breath caught. Time seemed to stop. Weber, the man whose handwriting she had memorized, whose ghost had haunted every page. He was real, alive, standing before her. Her voice trembled. "It can't be." Weber gave a small, tired smile. "Oh, it can. History does not die easily, Mrs. Martin, and neither do those who protect it." Briggs lowered his gun slowly, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "How?" Weber stepped closer, the dim light glinting off his wire-rimmed glasses. "You have something that belongs to me," he said gently, "and I have something that belongs to the world." Outside, thunder rolled again over the valley, and deep in the tunnel beneath the bridge, the past and the present finally met face to face. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. For a long, trembling moment, no one spoke. The dim tunnel light flickered across the old man's face, thin, deeply lined, yet alive with a fierce, unyielding clarity. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of decades. I am Johann Weber, he repeated quietly, his German accent curling around each word like a ghost. And you, Mrs. Martin, you found what I hoped no one ever would. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. Her breath came in shallow bursts, the sound of dripping water echoing all around them. You're real, she whispered. You wrote the letters. Weber's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. Letters are all that kept me alive. Words can travel farther than men, and sometimes they outlive us. Briggs lowered his gun but kept it ready. If you knew we'd come, then you also know we're being hunted. Weber nodded slowly. Yes, I've been followed too. They always follow the truth, Mr. Briggs. It frightens them. Elena stepped closer, clutching the satchel to her chest. You said in your letters the art must go home, that the train carried not gold, but souls. What did you mean? He closed his eyes briefly, as though gathering strength from memory. I was a historian once, he said. Before the war, before the world turned men into thieves of culture, I worked in Munich's museum archives, cataloguing art for preservation. That was how I saw what they were doing, how they took what didn't belong to them and called it order. His voice trembled, but not from weakness. From fury, they created lists of names, families, inventories of beauty and of suffering. When I realized what Train 77 carried, I made a choice. I could help them bury the past, or I could hide the evidence until it could be returned. Elena's throat tightened. So you were part of it, but you turned against them. He nodded, quietly, carefully. I replaced records, mislabeled crates, smuggled pieces to neutral territories under false consignments. When they realized it was too late, the train was gone, hidden under chaos. He stepped closer, his eyes shining in the lantern light. I have waited half a century for someone brave or desperate enough to open that door again. Briggs frowned. If you were trying to protect it, why didn't you tell anyone? Why let it rot for 70 years? Weber's expression darkened. Because men who claim to protect history often destroy it first. Governments buried my letters, museums turned away my evidence, the collectors who stole during war became patrons after it. His words hung heavy in the tunnel. So I stopped speaking. I left my letters where time could guard them better than people could. Elena's eyes filled with tears, and now they've found us both. Weber gave a weary nod. Yes, they never stopped searching for it, not because they love art, but because truth still holds a price. Briggs glanced toward the tunnel entrance, where faint footsteps echoed again. We don't have long, he said. Whoever's been following us, they're not far. Weber's gaze shifted to Elena. Then we must make a choice. You have what they want, but I have what they fear. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal box, wrapped in oilcloth. Its surface was scarred, but a familiar crest, the eagle, winged seal, gleamed faintly beneath the grime. Elena's breath caught. Another box, Weber nodded. The final piece. It contains documentation, signatures, photographs, and proof of the transactions that funded the thefts. If this box is made public, the entire network collapses. Museums, collectors, governments, all of it. The world will see what they built on the bones of the dead. Briggs stared at it, his jaw tightening. Then that's what they are after. Yes, Weber said. They will kill to keep this hidden. Elena stepped forward. Then we have to release it. Weber's gaze softened. You remind me of the young archivists I once taught. You believe truth can survive exposure. But truth is fragile, Mrs. Martin. It must be handled with care, not just flung into the fire. Her voice trembled, but her resolve didn't. Then teach me how. For the first time, he smiled, a tired, mournful smile that carried the weight of someone who'd buried too many dreams. You already know. You found the train, didn't you? You opened what others feared. The echo of approaching footsteps grew louder. Briggs turned, tension snapping through him. There inside. Weber's expression hardened. There's another exit, through the old catacombs beneath the fortress ruins. Follow the tunnel until you reach the carved lion's gate. Beyond that is the forest and a road that leads east. He pressed the metal box into Elena's hands. It was cold, heavy, alive with history. Take it, protect it. When the time is right, tell the story. Not for me, for those whose voices are trapped in silence. Elena shook her head. Come with us, he smiled sadly. I've been running for 80 years. It's time someone else finished the race. Briggs grabbed her shoulder. We have to go. The sound of boots striking stone drew closer. Flashlights flickered at the far end of the tunnel, slicing through the darkness like blades. Webber turned, eyes fierce despite his age. Go. Now. Briggs pulled Elena toward the narrow passage Webber had pointed to. She hesitated only once, looking back. The old man stood in the half-light, facing the approaching shadows, shoulders squared like a soldier who'd already made peace with his fate. Then the tunnel erupted with shouting German voices, commands barked with authority. Elena and Briggs ran. The path twisted and narrowed, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. Stone walls glistened with dampness. Somewhere above, thunder rumbled through the earth, as if the storm itself was chasing them. When they finally burst through the lion's gate, the forest swallowed them whole. Rain poured down in sheets, masking their footsteps as they stumbled through the mud. Briggs led the way, glancing over his shoulder. Keep going. Elena clutched the box to her chest, her breath ragged. The rain stung her face, mixing with tears she hadn't realized were falling. Behind them, far in the distance, a single gunshot echoed through the storm, muffled, distant, final. She stopped, frozen, turning back toward the fortress barely visible through the trees. Webber? Briggs grabbed her arm. Don't, we can't go back. Her voice broke. I know. Briggs said softly. He bought us time. Don't waste it. They pressed on through the storm, guided only by the faint glow of a road ahead. Each step felt heavier, each breath more hollow. The world around them blurred into shadows and rain, but in Elena's arms, the box pulsed with a quiet, terrible importance. She didn't know what was inside yet. She didn't have to. The weight of it told her everything. When they finally reached the road, Briggs flagged down an old truck that rattled out of the mist. The driver, a kind-faced farmer, didn't ask questions. He saw the exhaustion in their faces and simply nodded toward the back. As they climbed in, Elena looked out the small window one last time. The fortress was gone behind the fog, its secrets swallowed again by time. But she carried its final breath, the ledger, the letters, the box, the proof. Everything Johann Webber had died to protect now lived in her hands. And as the truck rumbled into the distance, the storm breaking above them, Elena Martin understood the truth in Webber's final words: history doesn't die. It only waits for someone brave enough to listen. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The days that followed were a blur of movement and silence, cities and backroads, safe houses and borrowed rooms. Elena and Briggs lived like ghosts, passing through places without leaving shadows. Every sunrise brought new names, new faces, new fears. Yet through all of it, the box never left her side. Wrapped in the same oilcloth Johann Webber had handed her beneath the bridge, it now felt less like an artifact and more like a pulse, a living thing that bound her to his unfinished truth. Briggs said little. His eyes, once sharp with suspicion, had softened into the wary calm of a man who knew the danger but accepted it. They both understood the stakes now. Whoever owned the truth controlled the story. And the story was worth more than money. It was worth silence. They reached Paris at dawn. The city glowed faintly under the pale sweep of rain, streets slick with light. Briggs parked the car in an alley near Montparnasse. the tires hissing on wet cobblestones. From here, he said, glancing around, we find the journalist. Elena looked up, confusion creasing her tired face. Journalist, he nodded. An old contact, Camille Durant, investigative reporter. She's exposed art smuggling rings before people who sell history in quiet rooms. If anyone can help us bring this story into the open without getting us both killed, it's her. Elena hesitated. Can we trust her? Briggs gave a grim smile. I've known her for 20 years, which means I only half do. They found Camille in a cafe that smelled of roasted beans and rain-soaked paper. She sat near the back, her coat draped over the chair, eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. She watched them approach with the wariness of someone who'd learned to trust slowly. Walter Briggs, she said with a faint French lilt, you still manage to make enemies interesting. Briggs smiled faintly. Camille, this is Elena Martin. Camille's gaze shifted to Elena, studying her like she was reading between lines. You're the woman with the train, she said. Not a question, a fact. Elena blinked. How do you? Camille tapped her phone. Whispers travel faster than truth. The art world has been buzzing for weeks. The woman who found the Nazi ghost car, they call you. Some think you're a fraud. Others think you've found the century's greatest secret. Elena swallowed hard. And which do you think? Camille smiled faintly. I think anyone still standing after what you've done deserves to be heard. They sat. Coffee was poured. Outside, the rain thickened, blurring the city into watercolor gray. Elena placed the box on the table between them. Camille's eyes flickered. May I? Elena nodded. Camille lifted the lid slowly. Inside lay Weber's sealed documents, the ledgers, the photographs, the evidence, a history of theft and survival compacted into fragile paper. She stared at them for a long time before speaking. My God, she whispered. Do you know what this means? Elena nodded quietly. It means everything he said was true. Camille looked up. This could shake museums, governments, private collectors, the entire foundation of post-war art ownership. These aren't just objects. They're proof of silence. Elena's hands trembled. Then help me break it. Camille hesitated. If I publish this, you'll be hunted, not just by collectors, by nations that built their prestige on this art. Do you understand that? Elena met her gaze steadily. I've already been hunted. The difference now is why. For a moment, Camille said nothing. Then she closed the box gently and nodded. I'll need a few days to verify. Once this goes live, it can't be undone. As they left the cafe, the rain had eased, but the clouds hung low, heavy and full, as though the sky itself were waiting. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of their small rented flat, the lights of Paris shimmering below. The ledger lay open on the table beside her, pages fluttering faintly in the draft. She thought of Lily, of her daughter's laughter echoing in their small house before all this began. She wondered if Lily would ever understand why her mother had risked everything for something that couldn't be touched or spent. Briggs entered quietly, handing her a glass of water. Camille's team is already scanning the documents. She's good, Elena. Careful. It'll take time, but once this breaks... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Elena's eyes were distant. Do you think the world will care after all this time? Briggs stared out the window. The world forgets the dead until someone reminds them they're owed. She nodded, her throat tight. Then that's what I'll do. Hours later, her phone buzzed on the table. A new message, unknown number. You think truth will save you. Her blood ran cold. Another message followed almost instantly. You think we don't already own the ending? She showed it to Briggs. He read it silently, jaw tightening. They know Camille's involved. Before Elena could respond, headlights swept across the window, 2, then 4, reflected in the glass. A car slowed outside the building, engine idling low. Briggs peered through the curtain. Same sedan, they found us again. He turned to her, voice sharp. Grab the box, we leave now. Elena obeyed, her pulse hammering. They moved fast down the stairwell, through the narrow alley that opened into the street below. Rain slicked the cobblestones, the air smelled of exhaust and danger. Behind them a door slammed. Voices echoed, male, firm in English this time. Stop, Miss Martin, they ran. The streets twisted like veins, light flickering between puddles and shadow. A siren wailed somewhere far off, swallowed by the city's heartbeat. Briggs turned sharply into an underpass, pulling her into the cover of darkness. For a long moment they stayed silent, listening. The footsteps slowed, then faded. Elena's chest heaved, her mind spinning. They'll never let this go, will they? Briggs shook his head. No, because the truth doesn't scare them. Exposure does. The rain outside turned heavier, drowning the city in sound. Elena looked down at the box in her arms, water streaking its surface. Somewhere between exhaustion and resolve, her fear broke into something sharper, defiance. They think they own the ending, she whispered, then we'll rewrite it. And in that single breath, Elena Martin, the woman who once bought a rusted train car for $200, became something she never intended to be, the keeper of history's reckoning. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. It fell steady and cold, washing the streets of Paris in a dull silver glow. Elena sat by the small apartment window, watching the city blur behind the glass. The box rested on the table beside her, sealed again, its contents too powerful to leave open, too dangerous to keep closed. Briggs was pacing, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, strained. Camille, you have to go underground. If they've traced you, they'll do worse than threaten. He listened, jaw tightening. No, don't tell me where. Just disappear. He hung up, exhaling hard. Camille's safe, for now. Her teams encrypted everything, spread the story across 3 separate networks. If they try to stop one, another goes live. Elena nodded faintly, eyes still on the window. And us? Briggs gave a grim half-smile. We're still the storm's center. The knock came just after noon. 3 sharp raps, polite but too precise. Elena froze. Briggs reached for his gun, finger tightening on the grip. Another knock. He motioned her toward the back. Go. Take the ledger. I'll handle it. But before she could move, a voice came from behind the door, calm, authoritative, female. Mrs. Martin, this is Inspector Laurent, French National Police. Please, open the door. Briggs frowned. That's too fast, he muttered. They wouldn't have moved this quickly unless... Elena's pulse quickened, unless someone tipped them. Camille, no, she wouldn't. Briggs approached the door cautiously. Proof, he called. A pause. Then a badge slid under the door, authentic, glinting faintly in the dim light. Elena looked at him, uncertainty tightening her chest. Briggs sighed. If they wanted to kill us, they'd have done it outside. He opened the door slowly. 2 officers stood in the hall, rain glistening on their coats. The woman in front, Laurent, had the sharp eyes of someone used to catching lies. Mrs. Martin, she said evenly, you're under investigation for unlawful possession of cultural property and suspected trafficking of historical artifacts. Elena's breath hitched. You think I stole them? Laurent raised a hand. We think you're in danger, and that someone very powerful wants what you're holding. Briggs studied her closely. You don't sound like you're here to arrest us. I'm not, Laurent replied. Not yet, but you need to come with me. There's an order from Interpol and your discovery has started a war you don't understand. Elena hesitated, her mind spinning. What kind of war? Laurent's gaze hardened. Between truth and possession, between what belongs to history and those who believe they own it. The room felt smaller, air thinner. Elena looked at Briggs, who gave a silent nod. Within the hour, They were escorted through narrow streets to a government building tucked behind a row of embassies. Inside, the air was cold, sterile, lined with quiet tension. Laurent led them into a small office filled with folders and photographs pinned to corkboards, maps of Europe, shipping manifests, museum archives, red strings connecting them all. On one wall, a single photograph made Elena stop breathing. Her train car, the image was grainy but unmistakable, the same rusted shell, the same overgrown weeds, and beside it, a series of newer photos, aerial shots, newspaper clippings, and a printed headline, "Stolen Art Convoy May Have Been Found." Elena turned to Laurent, voice trembling. "You've been watching me." Laurent didn't deny it. Since the first leak hit the dark web, half the world wants your find, Mrs. Martin, some for justice, most for money. Briggs crossed his arms. "And which side are you on?" Laurent's eyes softened just slightly. "The one that believes truth should belong to everyone, not be auctioned behind closed doors." She stepped closer to Elena, lowering her voice. "I can protect you, but you must hand over everything, the ledger, the box, the letters. Once we secure them, they'll go to The Hague, public record, no more secrets." Elena's fingers tightened on the satchel. She wanted to believe her God, she wanted to, but Weber's voice echoed in her mind. "Truth must be handled with care. What if you can't protect it?" she whispered. "What if it disappears again like it did after the war?" Laurent met her gaze. "Then you make sure it doesn't." The door burst open. A uniformed officer rushed in, breathless. "Madame, the files, the drive, it's been compromised. Someone's breached the archive." Laurent's composure cracked for the first time. "How? Remote access? They copied everything." Briggs swore under his breath. "They're already here." Chaos rippled through the room, phones ringing, voices shouting orders in French. Outside the window, black sedans pulled up along the curb. Laurent turned to Elena, urgent now. "You have to go. Take it all and leave Paris. There's a safe route north through Rouen. My brother runs a museum there. He'll hide you." Briggs grabbed the box, shoving it into Elena's arms. "We're gone." Laurent blocked the door briefly. "Mrs. Martin." Elena looked back. "Whatever happens," Laurent said, her voice fierce but steady, "don't let them turn this into another secret." Then she opened the side exit, pushing them through just as sirens blared. The street was chaos, flashing lights, shouting officers, the slick reflection of rain on asphalt. Briggs pulled Elena into an alley, the sound of engines roaring behind them. They ran until the noise faded, ducking beneath an archway near the river. The Seine rolled dark and cold beside them, carrying the city's lights in fractured streaks. Elena leaned against the wall, breath ragged. "We can't keep running forever." Briggs nodded grimly. "No, which means it's time to stop hiding." She turned toward him, eyes wide. "What do you mean?" He looked at her, rain dripping from his hair, a fierce determination hardening his face. "If they want this buried so badly, then we go public before they can silence it. Not through governments, not through papers, through the people. Broadcast it all. Every file, every letter, every page." Her heart pounded. "You're talking about going live?" He nodded. "You said it yourself, you're done being hunted. Then let the world see who's been chasing you." Elena's hands trembled as she clutched the box. "It'll destroy them." Briggs's voice was quiet. "Then it's justice." She stared out across the river, the rain falling harder now, blurring the city into streaks of gold and grey. For the first time, she felt the weight of choice heavier than fear itself. The truth wasn't just in her hands anymore. It was in her heart. She straightened, wiping the rain from her face. "Then let's end the silence." And somewhere above them, thunder rolled across the sky, not as a warning, but as applause. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The city had never felt so alive. not with beauty but with tension. The air itself hummed with something electric, something ancient. From a quiet apartment overlooking the Seine, Elena Martin sat before a small camera, perched atop a laptop, its tiny red light glowing like a heartbeat. Behind her, papers were spread across the table, the ledger, Weber's letters, the sealed documents, the photographs of the paintings, and the box that had traveled through decades of silence. It was midnight in Paris. And yet, she wasn't alone. Through encrypted links, mirrored networks, and back channels Camille had set up before vanishing, a dozen journalists across the world were watching her feed, waiting for the moment she would unseal history. Briggs moved in the background, drawing the blinds tight. His face was pale but composed. "Once we go live, there's no taking it back," he said quietly. "You understand that, right?" Elena nodded. Weber understood it when he hid the truth. "I understand it now that I'm unhiding it." Briggs gave a slow nod. "Then let's begin." Elena leaned closer to the camera. The soft hum of rain outside blended with the low thrum of her heartbeat. Her reflection in the screen stared back at her tired, scarred, yet alive with purpose. Her voice, when it came, was calm. "My name is Elena Martin. A few months ago, I bought a rusted train car for $200. Inside, I found something no one believed could exist anymore, a secret locked away since World War II. She opened the ledger and turned a page toward the camera. The faded ink caught the light. "This," she continued, "is the record of a Nazi transport train 77. It carried stolen art, jewels, and archives taken from families who were erased from history. For 80 years, this truth has been traded, silenced, and hidden behind museum glass and private walls. Tonight, that ends." She paused, the room utterly still. "This ledger," she said, "contains names not of thieves, but of victims. People whose beauty was stolen along with their lives. And these," she lifted the stack of Weber's letters, "are the words of the man who risked his life to hide what evil tried to own. His name was Johann Weber. He called this train a vessel of stolen souls, and he asked that if anyone ever found it, they return what was taken." Her voice trembled, but only slightly. "So tonight, I'm doing what he could not." Briggs leaned over and pressed the upload key. A progress bar appeared on the laptop screen, the files encrypting and scattering through a global cloud of mirrors and backups, programmed to release automatically once the transmission began. There was no going back now. Elena drew a breath. "These are the paintings found inside the car," she continued, showing high-resolution images on the second monitor, each painting flickering into view, names and catalog numbers beneath them. Experts have confirmed their authenticity. These works belong to families long declared lost families who deserve to see them returned, not sold. Her voice softened. "To the families who may still be out there, who thought the world forgot you, I haven't. The art you were robbed of was never just color on canvas. It was proof that you existed. It was proof that love survived even the darkest century." She turned slightly, gesturing toward Briggs. "This evidence is being sent now to journalists, museums, and international human rights organizations around the world. You can silence a person, you can burn a document, but you can't erase what's already been seen." The upload reached 90%. Briggs's phone vibrated. He glanced at it, expression tightening. "They know," he whispered. "They're watching the feed." Elena didn't look away from the camera. "Good," she said softly. "Then let them watch what they tried to bury." Thunder rolled outside, deep and resonant. The power flickered once. Briggs moved to the window, scanning the street below. Black sedans again. "Two this time." "Elena," he said, "we've got company." She turned another page in the ledger. her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. If you're hearing this, if you're seeing this, understand, this story isn't mine anymore. It belongs to every soul whose memory was stolen for profit. The progress bar hit 100%. The final upload light turned green. Somewhere across the world, files were opening on servers in New York, London, Berlin, and Jerusalem. The story was spreading like wildfire. Briggs unplugged the hard drive and pocketed it. It's done. Elena exhaled a long, trembling breath that felt like release and defiance all at once. Then let's make sure it stays that way. The door downstairs slammed open. Footsteps echoed fast, heavy, deliberate. Briggs moved quickly to the stairwell. "Get behind me," he hissed. Elena backed toward the table, clutching the ledger to her chest. Her pulse roared in her ears. A voice shouted from below. "Elena Martin, step away from the computer." Briggs's jaw tightened. How'd they find us so fast? Elena didn't answer. Her eyes locked on the small camera, still recording, still live. The world was watching now. Whatever happened next, she wanted it to be seen. She faced the lens one last time. If you're hearing gunfire, if you're watching this feed go black, remember this moment, because this is what the truth costs. The stairwell door burst open. Men in black coats flooded the apartment, shouting in accented English. Briggs fired once, not to kill, but to buy a second. The bullet shattered a lamp, plunging the room into half. Darkness. "Elena," he yelled. She grabbed the camera, ripping the power cord free and shoving it into her satchel beside the ledger. Then, with her other hand, she grabbed the small metal box, Weber's final legacy. They ran. Through the narrow kitchen, out the back stairwell, down into the rain-soaked alley behind the building. The city lights fractured in puddles, each flash of lightning illuminating the chase. Briggs turned a corner, breath ragged. "Keep moving." Elena stumbled, catching herself on a wall slick with rain. Where, anywhere, behind them, boots splashed through water, shouts growing louder. They darted across a market square, past shuttered stalls and glowing street lamps. The world blurred. Rain, fear, adrenaline, but through it all, Elena held the box tight, her mind a single flame. Get the truth out. Don't let it die here. They turned onto a bridge overlooking the river, the same river that had carried so many secrets before. The storm above mirrored the chaos below, wind, thunder, flashing lights. Briggs glanced back. They're gaining. Before he could finish, a bullet struck the pavement near his feet, sending shards of stone into the air. Elena screamed, pulling him forward. "Keep running." He turned, firing twice. One of the men ducked behind a car. Another lunged forward, shouting something in a language neither of them understood. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. "Elena," Briggs shouted over the storm, "when we get to the middle, throw it." She looked at him, horrified. "The box, throw it in the river." She shook her head violently. "No, Weber died for this." Briggs's face was pale, soaked with rain. "So the world could see it, not so they could take it back. It's already uploaded. Elena, the truth's free. Don't let them get the proof." She hesitated, the wind howling through her hair, the storm swallowing her breath. Then she looked down at the box in her hands, the last tangible link to the man who'd hidden beauty from evil, and she understood. Some things aren't meant to be owned, not even by the truth itself. With trembling arms, she raised the box over the bridge's edge. The river below churned like molten glass. "Elena, now!" Briggs shouted, and she let go. The box vanished into the dark water with a soft, final splash, swallowed by the same current that had carried so many stolen voices before it. The men reached the bridge seconds later, too late. The truth was gone from their reach, and somewhere across the world, the story had already begun to spread. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. Rain fell in furious waves, washing the night in silver. The box was gone, swallowed by the black river below. its secrets scattering like ashes into eternity. Elena stood frozen at the bridge's edge, her breath short, her heart hammering as thunder cracked above. For a moment everything went still. The world itself seemed to pause the storm, holding its breath, the lights of the city reflecting in ripples where history had just sunk. Briggs grabbed her arm. "It's done," he said, voice raw. "It's over." But deep down, Elena knew the truth. It wasn't over. It was beginning. Behind them, sirens cut through the downpour. The men who had chased them were gone, lost in the chaos or retreating into whatever shadow had sent them. But the sound of pursuit never truly faded, not from the outside world, not from inside her mind. They slipped into the narrow streets that wound away from the river. Paris was sleeping, unaware that history had just been rewritten while it dreamed. By dawn, they were safe again, at least for the moment. They'd taken shelter in a tiny hostel above a bakery, where the scent of bread and wet cobblestones filled the air. Elena sat by the small window, her hair damp, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the flood of messages pouring across her phone. It was everywhere. #Train 77, #The Lost Art Revealed, #Elena Martin. Dozens of countries, hundreds of news outlets, screens filled with her name, her image, her story. The video she'd streamed had gone viral in hours. Her voice, that trembling voice from the Paris apartment, was now echoing in languages she couldn't even read. She clicked one link at random. A major European broadcast was replaying her words, her face illuminated beside archival images of looted art and lost families. At the bottom of the screen, a subtitle scrolled across: "The woman who brought back the stolen souls of history." Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, tears burning her eyes. Briggs entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. His arm was bandaged, a scrape from the night before, but his expression carried something new, pride mixed with disbelief. "Turn on any channel," he said softly. "You're everywhere." Elena looked up at him. "Do you think Weber would have wanted this?" Briggs leaned against the wall, watching her closely. "I think he wanted the world to know, and now it does." She turned back to the window. The morning light was thin and pale, stretching across the rooftops. The city below was waking up to truth. For the first time in months, Elena exhaled fully. "So what happens now?" Briggs shrugged. "The world decides what to do with what you gave it." He was right. The truth was out, but justice was still fragile. By midday, the calls began: reporters, museums, historians, and then the governments. One by one, statements appeared. France, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, each confirming the investigation into Train 77. Photos of the recovered paintings began circulating online, those same canvases Elena had unrolled in her backyard under the fading American sun. Now they were displayed in press conferences beneath bright white lights, tagged with evidence numbers and provenance charts. Each brushstroke, once buried in silence, was finally speaking again, but with recognition came fury. Some nations demanded ownership. Others accused her of fabrication. Powerful collectors issued statements condemning her illegal possession of historical artifacts. Threats returned veiled behind polite diplomatic phrases. Elena read them all with quiet resignation. "They still don't get it," she murmured. "It was never about owning the art. It was about returning the humanity inside it." That night a message arrived. It was from an unknown email address. No name, no greeting, just a short sentence: "He'd be proud of you." Elena stared at the screen for a long time, the soft hum of the bakery below filling the silence. Then she smiled faintly, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Johann," she whispered. Days passed. The noise of the world swelled around her: interviews, documentaries, endless debate, but within it all, she carried a quiet peace. Until one morning, Camille reappeared. She arrived without warning, stepping into the cafe where Elena and Briggs had been hiding. Her coat was wet, her expression unreadable, but her eyes were alive with light. "You did it," Camille said simply. "You started something no one can stop." Elena smiled faintly. "I didn't do it alone." Camille sat across from her, pulling a folded newspaper from her bag. "You should see this." Across the front page, a headline in bold letters: "Families Identified Paintings Returned After 8 Decades." Beneath it, black and white photographs of descendants standing beside portraits once thought lost forever. Tears, smiles, history colliding with present. Elena's hand trembled as she touched the paper. "They're getting them back." Camille nodded. "Piece by piece. The first shipment leaves for Vienna tomorrow. More to follow. And the ledger, your ledger, is now evidence at The Hague. You changed history, Elena." She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. "I didn't change it," she said softly. "I just gave it back." Camille smiled, then let the world handle the rest. Briggs raised his coffee. To stolen souls, finally coming home. They clinked their mugs, quiet, reverent, more prayer than toast. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds had broken. A faint sun spilled across the street, turning puddles to glass. For the first time in months, Elena stepped outside without looking over her shoulder. The city no longer felt like a maze of escape routes. It felt like something reborn. Across the boulevard, a screen in a shop window played footage from her broadcast. She watched herself trembling, defiant as she said the words that had changed everything. "You can silence a person, you can burn a document, but you can't erase what's already been seen." Passers-by stopped to watch. Some whispered her name. A child pointed at the screen and smiled, and in that moment it wasn't fame she felt. It was freedom. She turned to Briggs, her voice low. "Do you think it's over now?" He looked out at the sunlight, then back at her. "No, truth doesn't end. It just finds new keepers." Elena nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward the distant shimmer of the Seine. "Then maybe it's time to stop running and start remembering." Briggs smiled. "I think Weber would like that." They walked together down the sunlit street, two survivors carrying the echo of a story that had once been buried in rust and dust. And as the wind swept through the city, it carried with it the faintest sound not of fear, but of rebirth. The truth was out, the art was free, and for the first time since that day at the forgotten auction yard, Elena Martin felt the weight of the past finally lift. She had unsealed not just the truth but herself. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The wind that carried her back to Europe was different this time, softer, not a storm but a sigh. Gone was the rush of fear, the relentless pulse of danger. In its place was something quieter, more sacred, a duty fulfilled and a promise to keep. The world had changed in the months since that night on the bridge. The paintings of Train 77 had been confirmed authentic, each one traced to a stolen archive, a confiscated family estate, a forgotten name on a Nazi inventory. Museums had begun surrendering their claims. Courts ruled in favor of the heirs, and one by one, the pieces of beauty once imprisoned by greed were going home. Elena Martin arrived in Vienna beneath a sky brushed with the pale gold of early spring. The air smelled of wet stone and blooming chestnut trees. The city was alive with music and murmured languages from every corner of the world. But beneath it all was an undercurrent of something timeless, the sound of history breathing again. She stepped out of the taxi, the hum of the street fading behind her as she approached the museum's grand marble steps. A banner hung above the entrance, fluttering gently in the breeze. Restitution ceremony, art returned to the families. The words alone made her chest tighten. Briggs was waiting for her inside, leaning against one of the pillars. His suit, for once, was pressed and formal, but the lines of sleepless nights still creased his face. When he saw her, he smiled faintly. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said. Elena adjusted the small scarf at her neck. "I promised Weber I would see it through." Briggs nodded toward the main hall. "They're waiting for you." The museum's interior was silent except for the slow echo of their footsteps. Light poured through high windows, falling across canvases once locked in darkness. Now they hung in perfect symmetry, restored, reframed, reborn. Elena stopped before the first. A portrait of a woman and child, their faces bathed in light. The plaque beneath read, "Recovered from train 77, returned to the Rosenfeld family, Vienna." She couldn't breathe for a moment. The brushstrokes shimmered faintly under the skylight, the soft pastels glowing like living skin. It looked like the painting was exhaling, as though it had been waiting all these years for the right eyes to find it again. Beside her, a woman in her 80s stood with trembling hands, her eyes glistening. "My grandmother painted that," she whispered in accented English, "before the soldiers came. We thought it was lost forever." Elena turned to her, unable to speak. The woman took her hand, her voice shaking but full of gratitude. "You brought her home." Elena wanted to say something to explain that it wasn't heroism, only necessity, but words felt small compared to the enormity of what stood between them. So she simply nodded, her throat tight. Across the room, families gathered around their returned treasures, portraits, landscapes, still lifes, each one a portal back to something that had been stolen but never destroyed. Reporters took notes quietly. Children stared up at the paintings, their eyes wide with wonder. Elena felt it then, a collective heartbeat pulsing through the gallery, the rhythm of memory. Briggs joined her again, his voice low. "You did it," she smiled softly. "No, we did it, and Weber, and the ones who refuse to forget." He studied her for a moment. "You ever think about how close this came to never happening? Every day," she said. "But maybe that's why it had to." They moved through the hall together, each painting telling its own story of loss and reclamation. One bore the initials V.R. Victor Reinhardt, the master whose lost work had started it all. The signature was faint but unmistakable. Beneath it, a note read, "Recovered from the Martin train car, 2025. Returned to the descendants of the Adler family." Elena traced the inscription with her gaze, emotion swelling in her chest. "He was right," she whispered. "It didn't belong to men of war, it belonged to the world." Briggs said nothing, but she could see the reflection of pride and relief in his eyes. A curator approached, his steps measured. "Mrs. Martin," he said in a thick Austrian accent, "there's someone who wishes to meet you." He led her to a side room, quieter and smaller, its walls lined with black and white photographs, families, artists, soldiers, survivors. At the center stood a young man holding a faded letter. He turned as she entered. "You don't know me," he said, "but you saved something that belonged to my great-grandfather." He held up the letter. She recognized the handwriting instantly. "Johann Weber." Elena's breath caught. "How?" "He was my great-grandfather," the man said gently. "When your story reached Germany, we recognized his name. He had a son before the war ended, my grandfather. We thought Weber had died unknown." He smiled sadly. "You made sure he wasn't." Elena reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the old letter. "He saved so much," she whispered. The young man nodded. "And so did you." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the ghosts of history now at peace. Later, as the ceremony began, Elena took her place among the families, not as a guest of honor, but as a witness. When the speeches ended and the applause faded, she found herself looking toward the high windows where sunlight spilled like grace. She thought of Weber standing in that dark tunnel, handing her the box. She thought of the wind over the bridge, the splash of the river, the faces on the walls, and she understood at last what he had meant when he said the train carried not gold, but souls. Because now those souls had names again, faces again, homes again. When the orchestra began to play softly in the background, Elena closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. The notes rose and fell like breath, fragile, luminous, eternal. Briggs leaned close. "You okay?" She smiled faintly, for the first time in a long time. Outside, bells began to ring across Vienna, not in mourning this time, but in celebration, and as she stepped into the sunlight, the weight she'd carried for months finally lifted. The world had taken back its beauty, and she, the woman who had once been mocked for buying a rusted train car, had become its keeper. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The night after the restitution ceremony, Vienna was wrapped in quiet celebration. Streetlights glowed like lanterns in the fog, and laughter drifted softly from nearby cafes. But inside her small hotel room, overlooking the river, Elena couldn't sleep. The world had begun to move again slowly, carefully, but she still felt suspended between then and now, between the weight of what was uncovered and the peace that was finally settling in its place. She stood at the window, the reflection of the Danube shimmering beneath the moon. Her thoughts wandered not to the reporters or the cameras, not even to the families whose art had been returned. Her mind went, as it always did, to him. Johann Weber, the man who had given up his name for truth, his years for remembrance, the man whose trembling hands had passed her a box and a burden she could never put down. On the desk behind her, the old ledger lay open to the final page. It no longer frightened her. The ink wasn't just a record of theft, it was a map of restoration. She traced the names softly with her fingertip. So many had come home. So many stories had found their way back through the corridors of time. She turned the page and saw a note she'd missed before a faint scrawl in the margin, almost erased by age. When the truth returns to light, so will peace. Elena smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "It has, Johann," she whispered. "It finally has." A soft knock at the door pulled her from her reverie. Briggs stood in the hallway, still wearing the same suit from earlier, his tie loosened, his eyes tired but alive. He held 2 small glasses and a half-empty bottle of red wine. "I figured," he said, "we should toast to something, not sure what yet, but something." She laughed quietly. "Come in." They sat on the balcony, the city unfolding beneath them in a slow rhythm of light and distance. Briggs poured the wine, his movements deliberate, steady. "To Weber?" he said first, lifting his glass. Elena nodded. "To Weber." They drank, the taste dry and full of history. Briggs leaned back, watching the stars. "You realize what you did today, right? You took ghosts and gave them voices." Elena smiled faintly. They were always speaking. The world just needed to listen. Silence settled between them, not heavy this time, but easy, like the pause after a long journey. Briggs looked out over the city lights. "What will you do now? You've changed history. You could teach, write, curate hell. Governments will probably throw money at you." Elena chuckled softly. "I don't want money, I want quiet." He nodded. "You've earned it." But she wasn't sure quiet was what she wanted either. She wanted meaning, something lasting, something that didn't vanish when the lights dimmed. "I think," she began slowly, "I think I want to build something. A space where the stories can live not in glass cases, but in hearts." Briggs turned to her, curious. "A museum, not exactly," she said. "More like a sanctuary for truth. A place where people can see what was taken and what was given back. Not just the paintings, but the letters, the ledgers, the voices. A reminder that art isn't just beauty, it's memory." He smiled, the lines in his face softening. That sounds like something Weber would have loved. Elena looked out across the city, her reflection faint in the glass. Then that's what I'll call it, the Weber Foundation. Briggs lifted his glass again. To Weber, he said. Elena added softly, and to all the souls who finally made it home. They drank once more, the warmth of the wine spreading through the cool night air. Below them, the Danube shimmered beneath the moonlight, the same river that had once swallowed the box, now carrying the echo of a truth set free. In the days that followed, Elena visited each museum where the paintings had been returned. She didn't speak at the ceremonies anymore. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough, a silent guardian standing at the edge of history. In Munich, she met an elderly man who clasped her hands and said, through tears, "You gave me back my grandfather's eyes." In Amsterdam, a little girl tugged on her sleeve, pointing to a portrait of a mother holding her child. "She looks like my mama," the girl said. Elena smiled and whispered, "Maybe she does." Each encounter left her changed piece by piece, moment by moment. She no longer carried the weight of discovery, but the grace of return. And everywhere she went, she left something behind, not fame, not money, but remembrance. By the time she reached Germany again, she carried only a single item, a framed copy of Weber's final letter, the one she'd found in the church archives. She placed it quietly on his grave, nestled in the green hills outside Königstein. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint sound of bells from the town below. She knelt, brushing the stone with her hand. "You kept your promise," she whispered, "and I kept mine." A single white flower, Edelweiss, had bloomed beside the grave. She smiled at the sight, tracing its fragile petals. "They belong not to men of war," she murmured, "but to the world." The wind seemed to answer with a sigh, soft and approving. When she stood again, the sun had broken through the clouds, spilling light across the hillside. She closed her eyes, letting it warm her face, truly feeling peace for the first time. Back in Vienna that evening, she met Briggs one final time before returning home. They walked through the quiet streets, past the museum where it had all begun. Briggs broke the silence first. "Do you think the world will remember you for this?" Elena smiled gently. "I don't want them to remember me. I want them to remember why." He nodded slowly, understanding. "You're not the same woman who bought that train car, you know." She looked toward the horizon, where the last light was fading. "No," she said softly, "but I think she'd finally be proud of me." As they parted, Briggs turned back once more. "You really think truth can survive?" Elena met his gaze, her eyes bright in the lamplight. "Truth doesn't need to survive," she said. "It just needs to be seen." He smiled, tipping his hat before walking into the crowd. And she watched him go, the sound of footsteps fading into the heartbeat of the city. Above her, the bells rang again, clear, bright, eternal. Elena closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. It was not the sound of endings. It was the sound of beginnings. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The hill looked different now. Where once it had been overgrown with weeds and haunted by silence, it now shimmered with morning light. Dew glistened on fresh grass. The scent of earth and paint and cedar filled the air, new beginnings breathing through old bones. Elena stood at the crest, the wind tugging gently at her hair. In the distance, the small town below was waking, roosters crowing, children calling, the sound of car tires humming faintly against the road. The world felt alive again, and so did the train car. The relic that had once been rusted and forgotten now stood reborn, polished steel gleaming beneath the sunrise, its old scars transformed into texture and story. Where bullet holes and decay had once gaped, now sunlight pooled through restored windows, falling across smooth wooden floors. The sign above the door read, "The Weber Gallery, a Museum of Memory." Elena traced her fingers along the letters. The paint was still fresh. She'd made sure it would be the same deep bronze used on the plaques inside, warm, quiet, timeless. The train car, once a vessel of stolen art, was now a sanctuary of return, a place where loss had found light. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the path below. The local school bus had arrived early, as it had every morning since she'd opened the gallery 2 weeks ago. Small faces pressed against the windows, eyes wide with curiosity and wonder. Miss Martin, one of the teachers, called as they climbed the hill. "We brought the 4th graders this time." Elena smiled. "Bring them in." The children rushed ahead, their shoes crunching against gravel, their voices bright. Inside the car, their awe fell into reverent silence as they stepped into the space, the hush that always came when history spoke softly enough for hearts to listen. The gallery was simple, intentionally so. The walls were lined with framed photographs and replicas of the returned paintings, each accompanied by a short story, the family's name, the journey of the piece, and the moment of its return. At the center of the car, displayed in a glass case, lay the one artifact Elena had kept, Weber's final letter. The handwriting was fragile, faded, but its message remained clear. Truth is not an inheritance. It is a responsibility. Guard it, share it, and it will outlive us all. Elena watched as the children leaned close, their reflections shimmering across the glass. One girl raised her hand timidly. "Miss Martin," she asked, "did you really find all this in an old train?" Elena smiled softly. "Yes," she said. "It was very old and very rusty and very full of secrets." Another boy frowned thoughtfully. "Were you scared?" Her eyes softened. "Every day. But sometimes being scared means you're standing in the right place, the one that matters." The children fell silent for a moment, absorbing her words the way only the young could, deeply, purely, without skepticism. Then a small hand reached out and touched the edge of the display case, leaving a faint fingerprint on the glass. Elena didn't wipe it away. When the group left, the laughter lingered. The air inside the gallery felt different, lighter, alive. She stood in the doorway, watching the last of the children disappear down the hill, their voices echoing across the fields. Briggs appeared beside her, his familiar half-smile still hiding behind exhaustion and fondness. He'd stayed helping her rebuild the train car, negotiating with curators, keeping bureaucrats and opportunists at bay. "You've done it," he said, his voice low and certain. "You turned a crime scene into a cathedral." Elena chuckled softly. "It's just a train car, Walter." He shook his head. "No, it's a promise, and I think Weber would have liked this ending." She turned toward the gallery, eyes tracing the sunlight spilling through the windows, catching on the gold of the frames. "It doesn't feel like an ending," she said. "It feels like the beginning of something else." He smiled. "Then maybe that's the point." They stood together for a long while, the breeze brushing through the open door, carrying the faint scent of lavender and rain. Somewhere down the road, a church bell rang once, twice, thrice, each note clear and patient. Elena breathed it in, letting the sound settle deep inside her. The bells had followed her since Vienna, from every city, every return, every ceremony. They'd become the rhythm of her redemption, the music of closure. When the wind shifted, she caught the faint sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see a man standing at the gate, older, grey-haired, with a walking stick and a folded newspaper tucked under his arm. He waved shyly. "Mrs. Martin?" Elena stepped forward. "Yes." He smiled warmly. "My mother was one of the families who got her painting back. I wanted to see where it all began." Her throat tightened. "You came a long way." He nodded. "For something like this, distance doesn't matter." He looked past her, into the car, his eyes glistening. "She passed away last month. But before she did, she said to tell you something." Elena's breath caught. "What?" He smiled gently. She said, "Tell her that beauty always finds its way home." Elena's eyes burned, but she didn't look away. She reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming." As he turned to leave, she stood there for a long time, staring at the path he'd taken. The morning sun climbed higher, gilding the train car in gold. Inside, the reflections of the paintings danced faintly against the walls, alive, breathing, eternal. Elena stepped into the gallery once more, running her hand over the smooth wooden frame of the door. The old metal beneath still hummed faintly, as if the past itself approved of its transformation. "Rest now," she whispered to the car, to Weber, to all of it. "You've done enough." From outside, the sound of children laughing drifted again, the same laughter that had once felt like an echo of hope, now a melody of renewal. And for the first time, Elena realized that this place, this hill, this car, this moment wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of every story that had been silenced, now finding its voice again. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The sun was low now, hanging over the horizon like a coin balanced on the edge of the world. The hill glowed amber in the evening light, and the train car shimmered with it, that same relic of rust and ruin now radiant, a vessel of peace instead of pain. Elena moved slowly through the gallery, her hand brushing each display as if saying goodbye to a memory. The day had been long. Schoolchildren, travelers, even local farmers had come to see the restored Weber Gallery. Some cried, some smiled, all left quieter than they arrived. That silence, respectful, full, was what she had hoped for. It was the sound of history being heard. She stopped before the glass case at the center of the car. Weber's letter rested there, illuminated by a soft amber lamp. His words seemed to float inside the light, eternal and forgiving. Truth is not an inheritance, it is a responsibility. Her reflection shimmered faintly over the words. For a moment she saw herself as she once was, the desperate woman at the auction, clutching her paddle, chasing survival instead of meaning. Then the reflection shifted, and she saw the woman she had become, still uncertain, still human, but no longer afraid to face what others had buried. The door creaked open behind her. Briggs stepped inside, carrying a small box wrapped in cloth. "They delivered it," he said softly. Elena turned. "What is it?" He set it gently on the nearest table and unwrapped it. Inside, nestled in straw, lay a brass plaque. The engraving caught the golden light. "In honor of Johann Weber, for protecting what could not speak. Beauty belongs to the world." Elena's eyes glistened. She traced the words with trembling fingers. "It's perfect." Briggs smiled. "The board wanted it placed above the entrance, said it should be the first thing visitors see." She nodded slowly. "That's exactly where it belongs." They carried it together to the doorway, the fading sunlight brushing against their hands. When the plaque was fixed in place, Elena stepped back, taking in the sight. The metal gleamed warmly, almost alive, as if Weber himself had finally been given a name in the light. "Do you think he knows?" she asked quietly. Briggs's voice was gentle. "If there's a place where truth can rest, he's there, and I think he's smiling." Elena exhaled, her gaze drifting over the horizon. "You know, Walter, for the first time I don't feel like I'm standing in someone else's story." He smiled faintly. "You never were. You were just the one brave enough to open the door." They stood in silence as the wind moved through the field. The tall grass swayed like waves beneath the sun's dying light. When Briggs left a little later, she stayed behind, locking the gallery, turning off the lamps, her steps slow and unhurried. The train car felt different at night, more alive somehow. The metal carried whispers, echoes of art being rediscovered, of laughter in the halls, of tears that finally meant healing. Elena walked to the far end of the car and opened the back door. From there, the valley spread before her in gold and shadow. The sky burned orange, fading to violet. In the distance, She could hear music drifting from the town, a violin, soft and fragile, like a heartbeat turned into sound. She leaned against the frame, breathing in the scent of grass and rain. She thought of her daughter, Lily, now in college studying history, of all things. The girl who once laughed at her mother's junk train, now sent postcards every week, each signed the same way, for truth, always. Elena smiled through the ache in her chest. From her pocket, she pulled a small, weathered object, the original key to the train car, the one she'd kept all these years. Its edges were dull, its surface worn smooth by time. She turned it in her palm, the metal warm from her skin. When she'd first held it, it had felt heavy, a symbol of burden, of mystery. Now it felt light, like a relic of peace. She knelt and placed it gently at the base of the plaque. "This was yours, Johann," she whispered. "You locked it once to keep the truth safe. Now it's open, and it's home." The wind picked up, curling around her words and carrying them into the golden dusk. Elena straightened, her eyes drifting toward the road that wound away from the hill. A small crowd was gathered at the bottom, families, visitors, strangers who had stayed late, waiting to watch the sunset from the place where history had healed. Children ran through the grass, their laughter ringing clear, echoing across the valley like music. She smiled, a deep, quiet smile that reached her eyes. The train car behind her glowed in the last of the sunlight, its walls humming faintly, not with sorrow anymore, but with life. It was no longer a relic of loss. It was a testament to endurance. A bird landed on the window frame beside her, small, bright, unafraid. It tilted its head, as if listening to something only it could hear. Then, with a soft flutter, it flew off into the amber sky. Elena watched it go, her heart full. She whispered into the wind, "Beauty always finds its way home." As the first stars appeared, she turned back toward the car one last time. Inside, the final light of day glowed against Weber's letter, its ink shimmering faintly like starlight. She whispered a prayer, not to any god, but to memory itself, to those who lost, to those who found, and to those who dared to remember. And then she stepped outside, closing the door gently behind her. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the valley, children's voices blending with the soft hum of evening. It was the sound of the world moving forward, the sound of healing. And as Elena Martin stood beneath the vast starlit sky, the same sky that had once watched over secrets and sorrow, she finally understood. Some stories don't end. They simply change shape, from pain to peace, from silence to song. And in that moment, as the hill glowed beneath the stars, she smiled through quiet tears, knowing the truth she had uncovered no longer belonged to her. It belonged to everyone. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The sun was low now, hanging over the horizon like a coin balanced on the edge of the world. The hill glowed amber in the evening light, and the train car shimmered with it, that same relic of rust and ruin, now radiant, a vessel of peace instead of pain. Elena moved slowly through the gallery, her hand brushing each display as if saying goodbye to a memory. The day had been long. School children, travelers, even local farmers had come to see the restored Weber Gallery. Some cried, some smiled, all left quieter than they arrived. That silence, respectful, full, was what she had hoped for. It was the sound of history being heard. She stopped before the glass case at the center of the car. Weber's letter rested there, illuminated by a soft amber lamp. His words seemed to float inside the light, eternal and forgiving. Asterisk, truth is not an inheritance. It is a responsibility. Asterisk, her reflection shimmered faintly over the words. For a moment, she saw herself as she once was, the desperate woman at the auction, clutching her paddle, chasing survival instead of meaning. Then the reflection shifted, and she saw the woman she had become, still uncertain, still human, but no longer afraid to face what others had buried. The door creaked open behind her. Briggs stepped inside, carrying a small box wrapped in cloth. They delivered it. He said softly. Elena turned. "What is it?" He set it gently on the nearest table and unwrapped it. Inside, nestled in straw, lay a brass plaque. The engraving caught the golden light. Asterisk asterisk, in honor of Johann Weber for protecting what could not speak. Beauty belongs to the world. Asterisk asterisk, Elena's eyes glistened. She traced the words with trembling fingers. "It's perfect." Briggs smiled. The board wanted it placed above the entrance, said it should be the first thing visitors see. She nodded slowly. "That's exactly where it belongs." They carried it together to the doorway, the fading sunlight brushing against their hands. When the plaque was fixed in place, Elena stepped back, taking in the sight. The metal gleamed warmly, almost alive, as if Weber himself had finally been given a name in the light. "Do you think he knows?" she asked quietly. Briggs's voice was gentle. "If there's a place where truth can rest, he's there, and I think he's smiling." Elena exhaled, her gaze drifting over the horizon. "You know, Walter, for the first time, I don't feel like I'm standing in someone else's story." He smiled faintly. "You never were. You were just the one brave enough to open the door." They stood in silence as the wind moved through the field. The tall grass swayed like waves beneath the sun's dying light. When Briggs left a little later, she stayed behind, locking the gallery, turning off the lamps, her steps slow and unhurried. The train car felt different at night, more alive somehow. The metal carried whispers, echoes of art being rediscovered, of laughter in the halls, of tears that finally meant healing. Elena walked to the far end of the car and opened the back door. From there, the valley spread before her in gold and shadow. The sky burned orange, fading to violet. In the distance, she could hear music drifting from the town, a violin, soft and fragile, like a heartbeat turned into sound. She leaned against the frame, breathing in the scent of grass and rain. She thought of her daughter, Lily, now in college studying history of all things. The girl who once laughed at her mother's junk train, now sent postcards every week, each signed the same way, asterisk, for truth always. Asterisk. Elena smiled through the ache in her chest. From her pocket, she pulled a small, weathered object, the original key to the train car, the one she'd kept all these years. Its edges were dull, its surface worn smooth by time. She turned it in her palm, the metal warm from her skin. When she'd first held it, it had felt heavy, a symbol of burden, of mystery. Now it felt light, like a relic of peace. She knelt and placed it gently at the base of the plaque. "This was yours, Johann," she whispered. "You locked it once to keep the truth safe. Now it's open, and it's home." The wind picked up, curling around her words and carrying them into the golden dusk. Elena straightened, her eyes drifting toward the road that wound away from the hill. A small crowd was gathered at the bottom, families, visitors, strangers who had stayed late, waiting to watch the sunset from the place where history had healed. Children ran through the grass, their laughter ringing clear, echoing across the valley like music. She smiled, a deep, quiet smile that reached her eyes. The train car behind her glowed in the last of the sunlight, its walls humming faintly, not with sorrow anymore, but with life. It was no longer a relic of loss. It was a testament to endurance. A bird landed on the window frame beside her, small, bright, unafraid. It tilted its head, as if listening to something only it could hear. Then, with a soft flutter, it flew off into the amber sky. Elena watched it go, her heart full. She whispered into the wind, "Beauty always finds its way home." As the first stars appeared, she turned back toward the car one last time. Inside, the final light of day glowed against Weber's letter, its ink shimmering faintly like starlight. She whispered a prayer not to any god, but to memory itself, to those who lost, to those who found, and to those who dared to remember. And then she stepped outside, closing the door gently behind her. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the valley children's voices, blending with the soft hum of evening. It was the sound of the world moving forward, the sound of healing. And as Elena Martin stood beneath the vast, starlit sky, the same sky that had once watched over secrets and sorrow, she finally understood. Some stories don't end. They simply change shape from pain to peace, from silence to song. And in that moment, as the hill glowed beneath the stars, she smiled through quiet tears, knowing the truth she had uncovered no longer belonged to her. It belonged to *everyone.